Finn, thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, we have a great panel today. My name is Matthew Newman. I'm from MLex, and joining us today we have Oliver Pischke, Kamal Janardhan, Pierre Devoize, and Karolina Mojzesowicz. So come on up. Thank you very much. Well, welcome to this panel. It's our final panel, but it should be exciting because we've got a lot to cover in 45 minutes. The title is How to Enable Privacy and Innovation in Digital Advertising. We did touch upon these hot topics in the previous panel. We had some lively discussion. Some of the people in the industry were complaining about lack of clarity, a desire to cut red tape in the digital sector. These are kind of constant themes that we hear about. We could explore that, but just to put this in framework for this talk, I won't go on too long because we have a lot to go over in a short period to do it. So we'd like to focus on the technological developments in the digital sector, and these are developments that should be in line with the GDPR, the landmark data protection legislation in the EU. GDPR has been much maligned by people in the industry, by consumers. People think that there's too much of a restrictive interpretation of GDPR. And just recently, we had a former central banker, Mario Draghi, who complained about inconsistent application of the GDPR around the EU. And this is creating legal uncertainty. Some things that we should keep in mind for the advertising industry is that we have the European Data Protection Board working on clarity, to give us more legal clarity. And recently we had a consent or pay opinion. We can go more into that on this panel. And then finally, we'd like to talk about cooperation, and that is largely between data protection authorities and businesses. How can we increase that? So just to kick us off, we're going to get a little bit of a taste of what's new in the business. I'd like to start out with some discussion of what kind of technological innovations we've seen that could enhance privacy in the digital advertising, and some examples, practical examples that are out there. They're known by the acronym PETS, PETS. First, why don't we start out with Kamal, who can give us a little bit of a taste of what's out there and what's new.
Yes, happy to, and thank you, Matthew. First of all, I love the acronym, PETS, who would not smile? But in a nutshell, some of the problems that have stayed the same over time is the volume of data, and advertisers looking for ways to unlock and activate it in a safe way continues to be a requirement. Consumers wanting rich, meaningful experiences as they engage online continues to be a requirement. And so one of the needs that has surfaced, and this technology, pieces of it have been around for a while, but the need is effectively, how can I securely and safely have a transaction online in such a way that I come in with my first-party data into an exchange and I leave with the insight, but no new information is shared or gathered. And last year, one of the technological releases that we did was something called confidential computing. And as I said, while these pieces have been around for a while, the intent was to build it into the advertising platforms to make it possible for you as an advertiser to bring data to a trusted vault, to have attestation by a third party that says that no one, not even the ad tech provider, for example, has access to that data, but you're able to do that rich transaction, the rich processing, and then leave only with the knowledge and the first party data that you came in with. And the hope here and the intent here is that was an open source release, so it's effectively available on the code is downloadable in the reference architecture. And for something like this to work and to be successful, our hope is for it to be a ubiquitous built-in part of the advertising ecosystem. And the only way that's possible is if it becomes a shared piece of technology. And so the vision and the intention and the hope is that we can leverage something like this confidential computing capability and make it a part of the internet, a part of the internet ecosystem, so that users no longer have to act like data accountants as they operate on the open web, and advertisers can focus on growing their business versus the very sophisticated, technologically expensive integration of data into these clean rooms and TEs as they are known today.
Excellent. That's a good first step for our understanding of pets. Moving on to Oliver, I would like to get your point of view on what kind of new technologies are out there that are enhancing privacy.
A lot. Maybe too much, I have to say. We're seeing a tendency as researchers that companies, platforms are stacking PETs on top of one another to become even more private. And I think Kamal said it, what it lacks a little bit is the standardization and its oversight. I think what we're seeing is that there's a lot of acronyms out there. And I mean, I'm German, I love acronyms, obviously, but you have MPCs, multi-platform computation, you have clean rooms, you have cohorts, you have 5, 6 different technologies, and none of them are really standardized, and none of them are really interoperable, or at least many of them are not. They're not interoperable between platforms, and this is something where we need standardization. I think that is actually where it's not about finding the next best algorithm to make it even more secure, a homomorphic encryption that is even better than the last one. It's about making sure that this is a technology that is standardized, transparent to the degree it needs to be, and also available to everyone in the industry.
Excellent. Pierre, do you want to add your thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, maybe I don't want the Commission to think that we've just started thinking about security. Obviously, this is something we've been working on for a long time. And the thing I'm interested in is making sure that these kind of technologies are usable for the wider membership. At Alliance Digitale, we represent more than 300 companies. So I would like them to offer to their clients such kind of new technologies. So it's really important what Kamal said about standardization, but it's also something that is really important for us, is about the current legal framework and how it can be incentivized to use these kind of technologies. And I think this is what we'll be mentioning afterwards, but this is key to make sure that we have a thriving and diverse ecosystem in the next few years.
Right. So I'm going to get to the heart of the matter here, which is about privacy and innovation. And the question is, can online advertising be just as effective by using less personal data? And so in this, we alluded to this about first-party cookies and third-party cookies. And also there's the whole idea of contextualized ads. So I'd like to get the panel's views on this. How do you make it effective and yet use less personal data? So maybe we could start out with Kamal.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. It's I think of the data conversation a little bit the same, but also slightly differently. I think critical is that we have a promise around how we treat data. So it's less of a boy in the dike, let's plug every hole with as many fingers as we have, and more of a, how do we create a secure, privacy-safe foundation to ensure that data is treated according to a certain set of user expectations and promises, according to a certain set of obligations around advertiser first-party data, while, and this is the key point, enabling a thriving and flourishing economic ecosystem. So The data exists because we want to enable not just very large businesses to thrive and succeed, but we want there to be an ecosystem that allows any kind of business to thrive and succeed, not just somebody who has the technological cost and sophistication and ability to build these multiple technologies that Oliver mentioned, but really the long tail where it doesn't become something that a business owner or a consumer has to think about. So in that context, I would actually like to say, let's shift that conversation to be about the right use of data, that there are protections and promises around how we treat that data, that is contextual integrity is preserved. And we join forces to actually make it less of a problem for everyone to have to think about, but actually a utility that is available for the ecosystem.
Of course, Google is in the middle of its privacy sandbox in the UK, and there was talk about phasing out of third-party cookies and going into a new system. We can go a little bit more into that. I just want to bring in Karolina, get her view on how online advertising can be effective using less personal data in the context of what the Commission is up to, because we have not only legislation, we have enforcement, we have the Digital Markets Act, we have the Digital Services Act, we have lots of EU legislation that talks about online advertising, and even live cases. So there's a live case involving Meta, and that has to deal with the whole notion of whether or not there's the consent or pay, and whether there's going to be a third way, perhaps a third option that might use less personal data. So Karolina, what's your view on how companies can thread the needle, so to speak?
Thank you for that, Matthew. But I don't think anybody expects here the Commission to give an advice how to comply with the law. I cannot do that, right? We are not the enforcer of the GDPR rules. On the DSA, it's a little bit different matter. But I think to the extent we are still in the question on this contextualized ads, indeed, it was our idea to promote very much this solution within the cookie pledge. It was soft law based on the idea of commitment, self-binding commitments by the undertakings did not really bring the effects we expected. But now, we are embarking on the work on the Digital Fairness Act. And President von der Leyen entrusted Commissioner McGrath with preparation of such a Digital Fairness Act to tackle broadly understood unfair techniques and commercial practices which are facing consumers in digital environment. Maybe you had a chance to see already our fitness check concerning the preparation of this act, where we see that the consumers still do suffer, and we have identified broadly 5 areas where further action beyond what was done already with this digital rule book, which is actually not so much about consumer protection rules, right? We have their DMA, it's fairness, contestability of the markets, DSA more, right? I give that, but DA not really, DGA. I don't want to, swamp you with acronyms, but this is not what it's here about. But so what are these 5 areas which we have identified in the fitness check? It's dark patterns. So websites and applications designed that seek to unfairly influence and mislead consumers. Second, addictive design, such as autoplay, infinite scrolling that keep consumers online longer than they intend to. Unfair personalization practices that seek to exploit vulnerabilities. Fourth, lack of clear rules on influencers marketing, and this is a big thing that was so far not tackled. And the last one are difficulties in canceling digital subscriptions. So we were able to even quantify this detriment to our consumers, which is estimated at 7.9 billion per year, between losing time and money by our consumers. The point is, of course, well, I said already, this digital rule book was not about so much consumer protection, a part of the DSA, but the question will be, well, what are you going to change and how are you going to rewrite it? So, Digital Fairness Act will not reopen the regulated matters. It will be very targeted and will identify and address identified gaps to ensure indeed this protection of European citizens. Of course, and I heard already the word and Draghi report and competitiveness. Obviously, it will be very much taken into account. The Act will balance between this safeguarding competitiveness and consumer protection. Will be aiming at low compliance costs and no additional specific reporting obligation and so on. I don't think I can say that much concerning the Digital Fairness Act now. It's really the evaluation of the fitness check and moving forward.
We heard from a previous commission speaker that there will be a very wide assessment, market study, and so the industry will be consulted on that. Pierre, you'd like to come in on this subject?
Yeah. First, let me get back to the, sorry for the mic, on the debate between contextual advertising and targeted advertising. I don't know why we keep having this debate. To me, there is a triple consensus, obviously, in the favor of targeted advertising. You have many studies that are coming from public authorities, that are coming from academics, obviously also coming from the industry. I encourage you to look at them. They are all listed in our latest position on the payer consent, so you could see it all by yourself. And practically, I think if it was not effective, publishers would have had just dropped wasting money to ad tech players, obviously. So I wish we could get out of this debate, because to me there is no debate, and obviously targeted advertising is always targeted. And on the DFA, I hear, Karolina, what you're saying. We're still quite worried about what you will be identifying as gaps. Obviously, we have seen in the fitness check working documents that there were a lot of constraints on very broad categories of players, obviously vulnerable consumers being one of them. Obviously, with the notion of fairness by design, we don't know actually what it stands for and how could it be applied both legally and technically. So it is something also that we would love to consider as part of, obviously, the public consultation in the next few months, but also as per ongoing discussion before you release the text in 2026.
Absolutely. More to come on that front. Before we jump into the next steps, just want to make sure that the other panelists, do you have any words about contextual ads, targeted ads? I just note that ads have always been targeted, but it's the way they're targeted. So that's what's contested by privacy advocates. It's not that people don't have an opportunity to consent. They may not be consenting in an informed way, which may be a violation of the GDPR. And that's why we're still talking about it. It's not like a done deal in terms of we still are waiting for the Irish Data Protection Commission to come back and rule on this. So it's a live question. Kamal, or do you want to come in on this?
I think I think more specifically, I won't comment on the I work in the global digital ads team, so we are sort of an ad tech provider, and a lot of the challenges in conversation have been around that. In that specific context, and to your point about personalization, the critical thing, and Karolina described this really well, is we want to ensure that data is not used outside that context and that it's used in a way that, and there are technological ways to achieve that. And these ways were not available a few years ago. I mean, we needed computing advancements to make it possible to be able to do aggregate processing, to assess what group of people would be relevant without ever uniquely identifying, to your point, a vulnerable group and so leveraging that technology to allow us, as Pierre described, to have the right conversation is something that one reason why we want to sort of go it together on some of these confidential computing and trusted clean room type technology, because we believe that implemented correctly, we're able to not make this a debate or an arm wrestle or a back and forth, but rather make it a ubiquitous, accepted part. And that'll require all of us to pitch in.
Caroline,
Well, for us, it was, and in particular, since the DPC outstanding decision is still pending, and also the whole Meta Pay and OK saga is still pending, I think for us it's also very important, more in the context of the DPC decision, what is the legal basis, and in order to be able to personalize the, in particular by big platforms, right? And I'm going here back to the opinion, to both the judgment of the Court of Justice in the Meta judgment Bundeskartellamt and the opinion by the EDPB, where on the one hand, in the Meta judgment, the court seems to give very strict interpretation of what can be done on the basis of legal basis contract. So to which extent you can use the data you collect on the legal basis contract in order then to provide personalized advertisement with this data. On the other hand, so very strict interpretation of that. On the other hand, well, the possibilities of large online platforms, whatever they are, because the opinion is not particularly clear in this respect, to avail themselves of the legal basis consent. And here I would like to underline that it's all very specific. Both the judgment and the opinion are moving within the area of very big platforms where, as the court underlined in the Meta judgment, the scale and scope of the processing was unique. So probably it's to be seen to which extent the restrictions on the possibility to provide a personalized advertisement, be it on the basis of the contract, be it on the basis of legitimate interest, would be seen also as restrictively by the court and by the data protection authorities, or first data protection authorities and then by the court, should it be a small company which does not process that much data and has much less data from the beginning on, right? The situation of Meta was using language of the DMA with various core platform services which generate, the use of which generates so much personal data is very unique.
Absolutely, yeah. The Meta judgment is fascinating to read. It gave Meta the green light, I would say, to launch into its payer consent model, which has been revised. So they've now have a third option where you actually pay less and you agree to have some contextual ads. So I think it's quite an interesting development, which is still being evaluated. So we don't know how that's going to work out.
Indeed, right? It's after the judgment, there was the opinion. It says what it says, and now the Commission is also applying Article 5.2 of the DMA, so this obligation to seek a consent in order to combine or cross-use data across various core platform services and third-party services. Here, but maybe we'll touch upon it a little bit later, I will stick really to the press release of the Commission, what was alleged against Meta, because the investigation is still ongoing, and I wouldn't like to say something that it's not already in the public domain. So,
please go ahead.
But indeed, there is a question still about the legality of the pay or OK solution as proposed by Meta.
Excellent. Pierre, you're in the business, and you have to deal with these court decisions. You have to deal with e-privacy directive. And I should probably stress the word directive because we're still waiting for the regulation, which may or may not ever come.
You can ask Karolina, maybe she knows.
she might be in the know. But yeah, so payer consent. How does that, in practice, how does that work out for publishers? How do they manage that in a real life?
The first thing I would like to get back on is I've seen a lot of controversy regarding Meta's Pay or OK. For me, the first controversy is really about the way the EDPB drove this opinion. So it drove this opinion on the basis of one single company. It did not consult the industry or any other. It contradicted nationals, DPA's former interpretation, and then it created a whole new category of player. And obviously, as you said, Karolina, this category is clearly unclear, to say the least. About how publishers manage, I mean, it's not for me to say. It's not for the regulator either, to me. There has been this tendency of DPAs to try dictating business models of publishers. I think it's the wrong argument here, and we've been saying this to the policymakers for a long time. So you will think it's an old argument, but we'll keep saying it until it remains true. And I think it does remain true at this point. And maybe one last thing, we all need to acknowledge that advertising revenue for publishers are under jeopardy. That have been shrinking in the last few years. So obviously they need to get their own revenues, and the payer consent model is one way. So I'm not saying it's the right way; it's one way to do this. And maybe one last thing, to me, the payer consent has one merit. It goes back to the basics. The basic is nothing is free, and you need to pay for it.
Right. So the internet is not free. Even Wikipedia, you're supposed to donate to it. So, Oliver, I want to get to you. Just if you could touch on the question about how because this panel is supposed to be about innovation. So, what is the industry? What could the industry do to make it easier for consumers to give their consent? What kind of ways are being developed by companies?
I think that the way that consent is collected is probably at the heart of the question to me. It's about what happens after the data has been collected. And I think we said it earlier, I think we need a better standardization, we need a better collaboration, and we need interfaces so that everybody can benefit from the information that was in the end collected. I think we're all, I'm surfing the internet just like everyone else here, and we're all annoyed by cookie banners. From a perspective of a research practitioner, I know that in some countries, our use cases, which are mainly around the question of how many, at what time, what did they do, we're not targeting companies, we're just collecting data that is in the end fueling the industry with information for ad buyers to where to spend their money, etc. I think it makes sense to differentiate the use cases a little bit better, what happens with the data afterwards. And I would, because I'm here and I'm Kantar, and there's GfK, there's Nielsen, there's Ipsos, all those out there, and we all suffer from the same problem, that we are becoming collateral of something in the industry where malpractices or dubious practices in terms of targeting, data leaks, etc., are not helping us to do our job. And I mean, even if you look at just outside of targeting, if you look at how many campaigns are still measured and booked in a very traditional way. You're looking for females, you're looking for males, you're looking for a certain age group, you're looking for a certain social stratum, etc., etc. And that information is vital to many media planners. And I think we have to enable the industry, by us as proxy, as research companies, to have the most exact, precise, and complete information at their fingertips to take their decisions. Again, this is not saying we should roll all of this back and it should all be legitimate consent. I'm specifically talking about the research use case.
Mm. Okay. One of the other, Kamal, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think one thing that I will add is I think there's almost a responsibility in this room or this consortium. Of course, standardizing will have, and a top-down, sort of privacy promise will accelerate us coming to this ideal of privacy, which I think is good. But privacy also, in a way, is a means to an end. It is a way of achieving peace of mind and safety, so companies and individuals can do other things. So the thing that I would sort of call out, which is the goal, economic innovation, I would call out is creating the right incentives. So reducing the burden even for the large players who today are often jockeying for, it becomes a marketing competition as opposed to a given around what is the privacy promise and what is the safety promise, like who can do the best story for their technology. So if we can give the right incentives to, say, drive revenue, where this kind of tech is sort of a commodity, and then you can innovate on top of it, and you can create sort of revenue opportunities on top of the tech. And then the second piece of it, which Oliver touched upon, is the user experience. How much time is spent by everyone in this room on navigating that experience, and the little multiple different flavors of clean room and different techs that offer privacy and are could be then replaced with this peace of mind, and the innovation could happen at another level, a new sort of security or experiences or business growth or advertising. And so that is the other kind of responsibility, I would say, of this room that goes along with the standardization.
No, the European Commission, as Karolina said, made an effort several years ago under Justice Commissioner Didier Reynders to address this frustration that everyone feels, everyone in this room, about cookie banners. And then the Commission realized that there was a lot more to this issue than meets the eye. So it's a big discussion. It's hardly over. There are some lingering questions about the direction of travel. And one of them is what's going to happen with this pending e-privacy regulation, which has been sort of the albatross for so Karolina, can you shed some light on
that
where we might go?
Well, no decision was taken. Indeed, the e-privacy regulation is, to call it by its name, stuck in the trilogues. These are interinstitutional negotiations between the two legislators in the European Union, the Council and the European Parliament, in the presence of the Commission. And it's the Council and the European Parliament which, using their mandates on which they work independently, and they, on the basis of these mandates, they negotiate in order to agree on a final text. Parts concerning the possibility to process electronic communication data by private operators, electronic communication providers, were actually not as problematic as parts concerning so-called questions of data retention. So access to such a data, the periods of a retention and access to such data by law enforcement authorities. So probably the solution the Commission will think about will be precisely to address these difficulties the Member States and the Council and the European Parliament had finding a solution concerning this question, and we will build already on the experience we have gained while negotiating the part on processing of electronic communication data, so development of Article 5.3 of e-privacy as it is now. And yeah, I don't think I can say that much more now, but I think we are all aware how all of this goes and feeds and works around this question of how do we want to tackle and regulate advertisement in the EU. Is it done already sufficiently? Is it sufficiently tackled, be it by the GDPR, be it by the DSA? Is it by the DSA, DMA? How do we want to make it more transparent, more clearer? Yeah, I think this is the reflection which we are going to have. Not to forget, of course, to make it a little bit more difficult, probably not very interesting for this audience, but we have also an act regulating political advertisement in the EU, where also the questions of use and of personal data for political advertisement are regulated. So how to do it all coherently and in a transparent way is subject to reflection.
Okay. I guarantee we'll be talking about this a year from now.
We are talking about it already for quite some time.
Yeah. The other issue this panel is supposed to address is cooperation between data protection authorities and the businesses, associations. I'm just wondering, maybe we can go in a little bit more on this, Pierre, if you want to talk about what kind of collaboration do you see, public-private cooperation in the field of privacy and innovation?
I think the first thing I would say is one cannot ignore the context we are facing now, obviously with the election of Donald Trump. I'm still quite amazed to see the different level of reaction between his first term in 2016, where the whole European policymakers decided to step in and say, yeah, we're going to be sovereign now because in the US we have somebody crazy or whatever. Now it seems like we have already lost. I don't see any strong political reaction to foster the European Union sovereignty and independency. So this is the first thing I'd like to point out. We cannot ignore the context. And there is also something else that is closer to us. That is the AI, the Gen AI tendency, where obviously most of the models and most of the tools are developed by non-European players. So there is this ongoing threat where basically we have the tendency to think that the European Union has fallen behind and will still lag behind if it doesn't take the right decision, especially about softening some kind of some part of the regulation. If I go back to the topic of the panel, which is privacy, that's not because of me.
It's not me either.
I'm going to try out, okay? Perfect. So if I look at what Commissioner von der Leyen said in the statement recently about simplification and everything, I heard about the 28th regime, so a regime that would help companies in different member states to improve competitiveness with facility in terms of legal certainty, in terms of fiscal activities. I don't see anything with respect to privacy. I don't see any statement to have a common implementation of the GDPR to start with, and it's relevant for us to ask because GDPR is not a directive, is a regulation, so it should be implemented basically similarly everywhere in Europe. And one last thing about the interaction between the industry and the policymaker and the regulators. I think we need to take this context as an opportunity and to say that we are going in the same direction. What we want is the European Union to thrive. What we want is to have the right companies. We want to have, and we also want to have influence. We don't want to lose our influence in terms of obviously diplomacy, but also military speaking. I mean, this is something that we cannot ignore, and it also starts with economic power. So we need to also think about this and make them aware that we should be going in the same direction with respect to what I've just described.
Excellent. Just looking at the panel, Oliver, do you want to jump in on this one, or Kamal?
Sorry, what?
Do you want to respond about enhancing cooperation between?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think one of the things I said earlier is we need some clarity around some of the use cases that are out there, which I think would require better clarification and discrimination. I think we also need legal clarity on some of the statuses of PETs. Let me take, for example, something like synthetic data, which many of you may have heard about. It's not just mock data. People tend to confuse that. It's not just made-up data. It's actually data that is modeled after real-life usage, and that falls into a gray area of GDPR. I don't know if there's any practitioners in here. Overfitting is a problem where your machine learning algorithm is trying so hard to make the synthetic data look so good that it actually becomes something like personal data. And those are things that where innovation and synthetic data is a great way, and you will agree with me, is a great way forward. But we need legal clarity around this. Where does personal data stop being personal data, and is it maybe in that case after the training still in a way personal data? I think the other thing is it's about money. I think if we want to democratize PETs. We have the first echelon, like you guys and Meta and some of the others, and we have all those SMEs out there in Europe and elsewhere that do not have the same means, they do not have the same knowledge, and they do not have the same power to innovate. And I think that is something where I could see, for example, grants from the EU that would allow for PET development and that would also allow for standardization across this, for interoperability. That would be, for me, one of the immediate actions that I would want to see out of the EU, yes.
Okay. Kamal, I'll let
Yes,
you
I'll
respond, and Karolina, you have
did you
the
want
final
to go
word.
first?
No,
Okay.
go ahead.
So I think three things, and I think two of them were well covered. I would say the first thing is for this room, that this technology is open source. It's, the reference architecture is out there, but the skepticism and the critical examination of various people in this room and on this panel is necessary for this to become a shared asset. So one call to action I would have is let's have that conversation. Let's create those partnerships so that we can push that forward. I think that's sort of essential. The second piece of it is that's how we will uncover all the challenges around, Oliver mentioned this AI model data, right? The synthetic data is a version of that. How can you allow for us to leverage AI to drive that economic growth while ensuring that we have the right guardrails in place? So that second piece of it, and that is only possible through a examination of a shared technology. And the last thing I'll say is when we were looking at releasing this, the confidential computing capability, there was an intentional decision not to create any monetization around it. So it is we already have an existing monetization model. And so if you interact with it, it should be built in. And that was intentionally with the reason because it should not just be the province of a very large, well-funded organization, because there is the belief that if it becomes ubiquitous, it will then create value for all players. So I'll say that, and then Karolina, last word.
Well, just very shortly, I wanted to come back to what Pierre said. I think they are fragmentation, already on the level of the GDPR. We identified it. It's in our report from last year, July. We try to tackle that, right? We are aware of it, and this is something that we work on. Another thing is, well, the sphere of the same notions. Let's take an example of consent. Are used now in variety of legislation, be it the DMA. Anonymization is used across variety of legislation, also in the DMA somewhere else. What is profiling, DSA? We cannot, we are pushing very much, and we are working also in the light of what the court said in the meta judgment on this sincere and loyal, as the court referred to it, cooperation between different enforcers when they are pursuing their aims under their legislation. And the last point, it goes back to this question, what is personal data, where is the borderline, and anonymization, pseudonymization, and so on. Very problematic issue. We are waiting here the judgment from the Court of Justice on the RSB appeal. The opinion of Advocate General will come this week. It's just to say that the Commission intervened in this case on the side of the private company, right? So it's already a message as such.
Yeah, that's a fascinating case, and it is coming Thursday. You can read all about it on MLex.
Matthew,
the day before.
If I may, if I just briefly may, I know we are already 43 seconds over, but there's one aspect which we should also, not we here, but you should think about, and that's that's sustainability. What we must not forget, we are now talking about the energy consumption of AI and how much that actually costs us and our environment. We should also think about all those privacy-enhancing technology, because they deploy in many ways the same infrastructures, they're using the same assets. You know, you will find AI, you will find machine learning, you will find heavy encryption, etc., etc. And we must not forget that whatever we do is going to come at a high cost in terms of carbon footprint. Something like a multi-platform computing or multi-party computing application may consume 20 to 40 times more energy and therefore generate 20 to 40 times more CO2 than a more straightforward approach. So before we just, you know, we're a little bit in a race where companies, behemoths in the industry outbid each other in terms of what can we do in terms of making things even more private, which sometimes doesn't even really add much here, but it comes to the detriment of our environment. You must not forget
Oliver, that's an excellent point to end on, because I rode my bicycle here, and I think I'd have to ride a lot longer to make up for all the electricity spent on AI and advertising. So thank you. I'd like to ask the audience to give our expert panel, a round of applause.